Then in March of 2015, he assumed command of the International Space Station as commander of Expedition 43. Throughout his 2 missions, Virts has spent more than 7 months in space and has taken a record number of over 300,000 photographs. Upon retiring from NASA in 2016, Commander Virts relaxed by breaking the world record for the fastest circumnavigation of the Earth from pole to pole. Alongside being an astronaut, Virts has had a successful career in filmmaking and writing, as well as starring and contributing footage to a film, the IMAX film, A Beautiful Planet. Currently, Virts travels around the globe, inspiring audiences with stories from space, as well as his insights into life on Earth. He brings his unique perspective to organizations worldwide on a wide array of topics such as our environment, intercultural leadership, innovation, decision-making, and much, much more. Now, if you would please join me in applause to welcome tonight's speaker, Terry Virts.
Thanks, Jacques. Good job. Thanks. Well, hello, everybody. It's so great to be here. I grew up just down the road in Maryland, and I'm amazed by this school. You guys have an incredible group of teachers, of students. This is a pretty cool place. If I was young again, I would nag my parents to try and get me to go here to Tower Hill. It's a pretty awesome school. But I want to talk about my space mission, but also some bigger lessons that I learned from my time in space. Some of them were surprising. I did not expect to learn these things, but every good space talk begins with, let's see, the clicker's not working. It was just working. Let me see. There we go. So every good space talk begins with launch. And my first flight was on the Space Shuttle Endeavour a few years ago. It was a really cold Florida February morning. And as you just heard, I'm kind of a camera guy, so I'd kind of snuck a camera out in the crew bus. And I got this picture of our crew. You know, everybody's just sitting there looking up at this massive beast. The shuttle was incredible. It was about over 4 million pounds on the launch pad. There was all this steam coming off of it because of the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen was so cold. It was like this giant hypersonic dragon coming to life. But the trip into space actually didn't start on the launch pad. It started a few miles before that in this place called crew quarters. If you look at the old Apollo videos of Neil and Buzz getting suited up, we literally had the same chairs, the same government, recliners, the same machines putting oxygen in. We went out, got our orange suits on, got out in that old Airstream trailer that we call it the Astro van. There was a big crowd of people. It was about this size cheering for us. Went a few miles, and there was a smaller crowd of people at the end of the launch pad, cheering for us. And when we got to the launch pad, there were these guys standing there with guns, guarding it. We went up to the top. There's only one person left. He straps you in, shuts the hatch, and then they go down and drive away as fast as they can. So we flew in space, and NASA always takes the crews and sends them back to thank people all around the country. Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland is one of the NASA centers that we went to. And as part of our cruise post-flight, we call it, we actually went back to the Kennedy Space Center, and one of the groups that we talked to were the security guys. It was all the people that were standing right here by the launch pad. And so we were sitting there in the room, and I'm like, why are you guys out there? Is there really Al-Qaeda hiding in the swamps, trying to kill us? And I'll never forget, this guy looked at me in complete deadpan seriousness, and he was like, no, sir, we're there to make sure you get on the shuttle. And, knowing what I know now, I think he was telling the truth, because the actual launch itself, something magically happened, it's working, was incredible. It was something I had never experienced. I'd been a test pilot. I flew all these different airplanes, flew F-16s over Iraq. There is nothing like being in a space shuttle. You can see, that amount of fire. When the engines lit up, there was this thin deck of clouds, about 5,000 feet up, and the light from that just reflected off the clouds. It turned nighttime into day. You can Google STS-130 launch, and people post their home videos on there, and everybody's sitting there and they're counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and as soon as the engines light up, nighttime turns to day. It was incredible. This 4 million pound vehicle had 7 million pounds of thrust, so all of a sudden you're smashed back. I know the seniors were talking about physics. You can calculate the acceleration there, but it was well over 1G. So the shuttle and I went on a Russian Soyuz later, they get up to 3 Gs. I think the Soyuz is even 4. So that's like laying on your back and have a couple of your buddies lay on top of you. That's what it feels like. And it's about 8.5 minute ride into space. So this acceleration goes on for a while. It was pretty incredible. And this is just a very small taste. If we can turn the lights down too, as dim as we can get them. This is a very small taste of what it's like to launch on a space shuttle.
We're T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. We have to go for ready to start. 2, 1, 0. Booster ignition and liftoff of Shuttle Endeavour with NASA's final space station crew compartment that brings a bay window view to our celestial backyard.
The sound was incredible. About 6 seconds before launch, the 3 main engines lit up because the computers wanted to make sure that they're running. Because once those big solid rocket motors light, something very significant is going to happen. You can't turn those off. And the vibration was amazing. It was like having somebody just grab you and shake you as hard as they can. Those 2 big engines that you see there burn 10,000 pounds a second of fuel, and the 3 main engines on the back of the shuttle, each of those burns 1,000 pounds a second. So it's 23,000 pounds every second, or about over 11,000 kilograms. So the gas mileage really sucks on a space shuttle, but the top end speed's pretty good. You go from 0 to 17,000 plus in a little over 8 minutes. This is one of my favorite pictures. A guy named James Vernicatella took this. I put it in I have a National Geographic photography book. We got it in there. He just wanted a copy of the book, and so he let me use the image. But it's a time lapse. We were talking about photography at dinner before this. So he set up the camera and just left the shutter open for the entire time ride into space. You can see us going through that deck of clouds that I talked about. You can see where it gets really bright, where the solid rocket motors came off. You can see the moon over there. We were actually launching towards the moon. The stars are moving because that's how much the Earth rotates in the few minutes of a launch. You know, the Earth's not still; it's actually rotating. So it's just a really cool picture. But like I said, my journey into space didn't start on the launch pad, and it didn't start in crew quarters either. It really started when I was a kid. And the first book I ever read in kindergarten was called, I don't know what it was called, but it was about Apollo. It was one of those cardboard books that you get like one line per page. And I was hooked. So when I grew up, I had posters of the space shuttle, actually, and I had posters of an F-16, actually, and galaxies and nebula. That's just what I wanted to do ever since I was a kid. And when I was 13, a family friend had me read a book called The Right Stuff, which is incredible. If you're into that exploration or flying or anything, I highly recommend reading The Right Stuff. It's a pretty good movie too. The movie has definitely weathered time well. It's aged well. And it talked about how the early astronauts had been fighter pilots and then test pilots, and I didn't know what to do. Nobody in my family, my mom and dad didn't even go to college, and so that moment reading that book really mapped out the path for me. So I ended up going to the Air Force Academy back in the 80s, and I got a math major, but a French minor. So I'm kind of weird. I like both the right and left side of my brain. I got a really bad haircut too at the time. And I ended up going to pilot training and flying F-16s. The picture when I was a new F-16 pilot. And a few years later, I got into test pilot school. I was at Edwards Air Force Base, and NASA said, "Hey, we're going to have a new class of astronauts." And everybody at Edwards wants to be an astronaut. That's why you go to be a test pilot, pretty much. And so I went ahead and applied. We were still students. We hadn't even graduated yet. And one of the boxes on the application is test pilot school attended, and you're graduated. So most of my classmates did not apply, and they were like, "You haven't even graduated, you don't have any experience." But I went ahead and applied. I went through the process, and you start off in this big giant pool, and it gets narrowed down. You have to go through several hoops, and at every step of the way, all of my friends and fellow test pilots assured me that I was not going to get picked. This other guy has a lot more experience than you do. This other guy is a lot smarter than you are. This other guy's better looking than you are. They literally had every excuse, and I didn't think I was going to get picked either. I mean, it was crazy. I just figured this is what I want to do, so I'm going to go for it. Well, long story short, I ended up getting selected. I was the youngest pilot that NASA had in a long time. Maybe, I don't know, maybe ever. It was unexpected. Everybody at Edwards was like, they couldn't believe it. But then we had the Columbia accident, and they had hired too many astronauts, and they weren't flying rookies, they were only flying old guys. So we had this giant glut of astronauts at NASA, and there weren't any classes for a long time. And all those guys who said, well, I'll apply the next time, and they waited to do it, they never got picked. And they really were smarter than me and better looking than me. And so I learned a really profound lesson, and it's a great lesson for this group of high school kids and also for adults. And the lesson is, don't tell yourself no. If there's something that you want to do, if you have a dream, if you have a passion, don't tell yourself no. If you tell yourself no, you're not going to get it. If you tell yourself yes, and it's a really big dream, like you want to be an astronaut, or you want to be a doctor, or you want to run a company, or whatever, you can't just say that. Words are very cheap. It's very easy to say you want to do these things. You have to map your way out. Like the right stuff showed me how to map my career out. And it's hard work to get those things, and you might not get them. But the very first step, don't tell yourself no, I think is the most important step of all. If you don't get what you're going for, you can try again, you can work harder, you can improve your resume, or maybe you just don't get it, but at least you tried, you were true to yourself. So that's my advice, my career advice is don't tell yourself no. But I ended up getting to NASA. It was a long wait. I was there for almost a decade before my first flight because of all those things I just mentioned. But both of my space flights took me here to the International Space Station. It's an incredible machine. It's this orbiting outpost. My first flight, we actually finished building the space station. And so we brought up Node 3 and the cupola, which were the final two modules for the ISS, right here, as you're looking on the left side. The station, this is the Russian segment back here, and then everything forward of here is the US segment. But we built this, which is a living module, and that down there is the cupola, which is this big windowed module. I'm going to show you a bunch of pictures from that. And then on my second flight, I went back about 4 or 5 years later. I launched on a Russian Soyuz cargo or crew vehicle. That's the Soyuz right there. It's kind of hard to see, but that's a Soyuz. And I ended up spending 200 days on that flight, so a little over 7 months here. And the first, there's all these questions. What's it like in space? We were talking about that at dinner. And the first thing is you're weightless. And when you're weightless, that is a kind of this overwhelming, most powerful force I've ever. I know it's not a force. The physics teachers are cringing, but it feels like that. And what it feels like is you're falling. So here on Earth, I could drop this, and 9.8 meters per second squared, it's going to drop. Well, the station's only a couple hundred kilometers above the Earth, so the gravity from Earth is very strong. It's not 0 g. It's, I don't know what it is. It's 9.7 or 9 meters per second squared or something. The acceleration is almost as strong as it is on Earth. So if I drop this clicker in space, it would fall almost the same amount each second. The difference is you're moving forward 5 miles a second, or 8 kilometers a second. So in the 1 second it takes this thing to hit the floor, it moves forward 5 miles. And so that falling and dropping makes a curve. And that curve, if you're at the exact right speed, is the same shape as the Earth, and you're in an orbit. And to the human brain, it feels like you're falling because you're falling. There's ways to experience that here on the planet. You guys are probably too young to remember. We used to have diving boards before we had lawyers. But I was taught, somebody's dad runs the local airport here. You can get in an airplane and you can push over and you can get weightlessness for a couple seconds. But in space, that happens forever. You know, they turn off the engines and you're floating for, in my case, 200 days. So that's a really interesting process. It's a very steep learning curve to learn how to float. There's a chapter, my most recent book, How to Astronaut, there's a whole chapter about what it's like to adapt to floating. It's very cool. Eating in space is also another important part of life in space. And on Earth, we just had some great Italian Toscanos. That was amazing. But you don't get that in space. There's not like fresh food. Every once in a while when the cargo ship shows up, there might be some fresh apples or carrots or oranges or something. But, you know, it's not like a prepared meal. But the meals that we have are basically similar to military food. So this is my Thanksgiving dinner on my second flight. These things are similar to MREs. It's a green bag, you rip it open, and there's meat, there's vegetables, there's desserts, there's soups, whatever kind of food that can be preserved and they irradiated is what goes in there. This is dehydrated food. NASA calls it rehydratable. So any kind of food that can be dehydrated, meats, vegetables, fruits. Dehydrated strawberries were popular. Scrambled eggs were popular. It's kind of hard and crunchy, and you plug it into a machine, push a button, and it fills up with water. You mash it around, wait about 10 minutes, and it turns into food. The silver thing up top, Capri Sun, it's not a Capri Sun, but it's like that. It's just whatever powdered drink you can make. And so tea and coffee, Gatorade, and we actually have Tang. There's lots of fruit juices, and the Tang company makes them. We had smoothies, anything that you can make in a powdered form. We had dehydrated water, basically empty bags that you could fill up with water and have water bags. But no carbonation. That's the big problem. So there's no Diet Cokes or anything that you need carbonation, because it would just cause the water to shoot off. One of the fun things I did was put an Alka-Seltzer tablet in a ball of water that was floating, and it just kind of floats and randomly shoots water off in different directions. So the eating in space is pretty good. This table, you can see all of these things are Velcro tabs. And these little blue circles, those little blue dots are Velcro. So you have to either Velcro the food to the table, or there's some duct tape. There's on here backwards. Literally, there's duct tape right there. You put it on backwards, and so the food sticks. Or these bungee cords, that are all nasty because it's got lots of a decade of food stuck to it. You need something to keep track of your stuff, or it'll float away. So that was very important. And after you eat, you have to go exercise. And so exercise is a really important part of life in space, because right now on Earth, just standing here, my body is fighting gravity. My bones and muscles are actually fighting against the gravity that you have. In space, you don't ever get that ever unless you actively exercise. And they found back in the Russian Mir days, it's almost like a straight line. It's a linear decrease in bone density. So your bones just get weaker and weaker and weaker, unless NASA came up with this exercise protocol. So for me, I took a vitamin D tablet every day. On Earth, you get vitamin D from the sun and milk, which we don't really have milk, and we don't have the sun in space because you're in this metal can. So I took a vitamin D tablet, and I did my 2.5 hours of exercise. And this is a clip of the exercise. Thank you to the IMAX company. They let me borrow a few of these clips from the movie I helped make, A Beautiful Planet. But this is me running on the treadmill, which is kind of cool because it's on the wall, which is not normal for treadmills. It's also wobbling. If it was attached, the vibration that I caused would literally have vibrated the space station apart and broke it. This is my crewmate Samantha. All the weight lifting you can do here in your football gym, they have those in space. Deadlift, squat, bench press, the basic stuff. Again, that whole machine is moving and floating on this vibration isolation system to keep you from vibrating the station apart. And so they gave us an hour and a half on this machine every day and an hour of cardio, either on the treadmill or we had a bike also. And between all that, I did this big DEXA scan X-ray before launch, and then I did another one after I landed 200 days later, and I had lost 0.0% of my bone density, overall bone density, which is pretty amazing. I did not expect that. And the doctors were, normally you lose a little bit, but I was just being diligent about that. And the lesson there is astronauts basically get osteoporosis, which is a bone disease that normally older women get on Earth, and a little bit of weightlifting. Like if you just take a 10-pound dumbbell and just do basic weights, can prevent you from getting osteoporosis. That's kind of the lesson learned that I share. One of the things that we learn in space, especially for women, a little bit of resistive exercise can go a long way to preventing that terrible disease. This is another part of life in space, is getting your hair cut. My hair is pretty simple. I just had my hair cut this weekend. I was turning into a hippie. It was touching my ears, so I had to get it trimmed. For me, you put the number 2 on the clipper, attach the vacuum to it, and about 30 seconds later, I got my hair cut. Pretty easy. Samantha is an Italian lady, and she's not just any Italian. She's actually the most famous Italian on Earth. We did a post-flight visit to Italy after our trip. There were mobs of people at train stations when they knew that we were coming into town to see her. She's very popular. So she wouldn't let me launch into space before I went with her to her hairdresser in Houston, and I learned how to cut women's hair. She literally sat there, and I spent 2.5 hours learning how to cut women's hair. It was very difficult. And so we get into space a couple months after we get to space. She's like, Terry, it's time. And so we got Anton, our Russian crewmate. He was holding the vacuum cleaner, and I had to cut her hair. And I'll tell you, like I said, I flew F-16s in Iraq. I piloted the space shuttle in space. I've done spacewalks. Um, Cutting Samantha's hair in space was the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. You could see look how nervous I am there on that picture. So it turned out pretty good. Sleeping in space is really cool. It's one of the most enjoyable parts of being in space, to be honest. And I was worried before my first flight. I didn't know if I'd be able to sleep. On the first day, they give you Phenergan. You get a Phenergan shot in your butt. Phenergan is a anti-nausea medicine. A lot of times pregnant women take it. And it knocks you out. And so at the end of the first day, like literally the whole crew lined up, and they drop your pants, and that guy was giving shots, but I didn't need it. It turned out, and it was kind of funny. About 5 days later, I was like, something's itching, and I still had my Band-Aid on. I forgot to take my Band-Aid off. But the sleeping in space was not a problem, man. I was out immediately. This was on the Space Shuttle. You just had to find a spot on the wall or ceiling or somewhere, clip your sleeping bag, and everybody slept basically in the same little small room. But on the space station, you have your own crew compartment. And anyway, so this is the area that you have as your private little cabin there. I went to sleep every night for about a month listening to the Interstellar soundtrack, which is one of my favorite soundtracks. Hans Zimmer is incredible, and that movie had just come out when I flew. So, and I saw it in Russia in Russian, so I didn't really know what happened. And then I got to watch it in space in English, and I was like, "Oh, that's his daughter." Okay, But then our Russian colleagues, the psychologists sent up these sounds from Earth. Um, Birds chirping, waves at the shore, a crowded cafe, rain. It was the most amazing thing. We all just fell in love with it. So I spent about a month going to sleep to rain. And that month I was dreaming of Earth. It was really weird. Most of the time I didn't ever have dreams, or they were just blackness of space dreams. But that month that I was listening to sounds from Earth, I actually dreamt of Earth, which is so the mission of the space station is science. That's why these nations came together so many years ago. This is a glove box that a lot of pharmaceutical companies use on Earth. Anything that you don't want to break and then float out, you can do in a glove box. Now they have one that's twice the size that 2 astronauts can work at the same time. We did some microbiology experiments in there. We did rodent research. It was probably one of the most important science that the space station does. So the science was really fun. I'm not a scientist, I'm a pilot, but it was really cool to do all 250 different experiments on the long duration flight. Spacewalking was another part of life in space. And on my first flight, I did not get a chance to do a spacewalk. The NASA doesn't let the pilots do spacewalks because somebody needed to fly the space shuttle back. So shuttle pilots never did spacewalks. But now that we have a station, there's no more pilots, really. Everybody does everything. So I was really lucky. I got to do 3 spacewalks in a week. That was an incredible experience. I've written a lot about it in both of my books that came out about space. It's an amazing experience. And so you can see just how big and bulky that suit is. It weighs several hundred pounds on Earth. It's pressurized, so you're like the Christmas Story kid that can't move in a snowsuit, except you have big metal rings at the major joints. So the Christmas Story kid could at least do this, and you can't do that. You can only move in like one plane in the spacesuit. So it's a serious workout, and you're in the suit for probably 8 to 9 hours between getting suited up and post spacewalk. So it really wears you out, and you're concentrating 100% on every little step, because if you make one little step, you might float away or break something, and so it's really an exhausting thing, but it's incredible. I could have so many stories to tell about this, but this is a GoPro that it was actually a Russian GoPro. They went down to Best Buy and bought a GoPro, and they built this little white box to keep it pressurized with air and also from getting too hot from overheating. And I borrowed it, And on my 3 spacewalks, I took this GoPro out and took some videos. And Tony Myers actually got it into the IMAX movie, Beautiful Planet. She did a really great montage. But this video just gives you an idea of what it's like to be out there, because your face is full of equipment. Every single one of those equipments is on a tether. You see that little white line there is a tether, but everything has tethers on it. This is the metal part of a tether. That's the metal part of a tether. These are tethers on me. That's a tether right there to the GoPro camera. Like, everything is tethered. And so you have to make sure that you keep track of these tethers, because if you don't, they'll get wrapped around and it'll get stuck. And it's just a constant, you're herding cats basically for all the 6 hours while you're outside. And the experience of being on a spacewalk is 99% work. 99% of the time you have a face full of metal and equipment, and you're just crawling. You crawl around with your hands, not with your feet. And then every once in a while you could look away, and I'll never forget. I had a few seconds, and so I just stopped and I kind of looked, and I could see the sunrise happening from one end of the earth to the other. I couldn't see the station that was behind me, and it was like I was seeing creation, like I was hearing from God. This is something that humans weren't meant to see. It was the most spectacular thing. You can see this view. The screen is not great right now. You can't see it that well, but you can imagine. It's something that you can't imagine until you see it, just how powerful that was. And then I had to get back to work because I had this, what I'm doing here, I'm putting grease on bolts. That's a bolt that I was sticking this thing down in there to put grease on it. And so it was a really huge swing from putting grease on bolts and running cables. We ran the cables for the SpaceX capsules to dock, and looking at this incredible, beautiful scene that you just can't imagine. And that's really the story of spaceflight in general. From the first minute on the space shuttle launching, I was busy flying the shuttle, and I look out and I see these amazing things. But when our shuttle rolled the heads up, I had the view. I was on the right side, so I could look out the window and look down. I could see I-95 from South Carolina to Boston. Saw Tower Hill School there on I-95 for like 1 second because we were rolling, and then I had to get back to flying. And so that's the way space flight is. I knew I had made it when I had my own Lego. My Samantha, her boyfriend at the time, now husband, got each one of us our own little private or personalized Legos. So if you had a microscope, you could zoom in and see Virts written on there. And I'm a sports guy, so he got me an American football Lego thing. That was pretty cool getting that. But while we were waiting for launch, maybe a week before launch, a couple weeks before launch, I was in Russia, and Hyundai reached out to my family, and they wanted to do a commercial with my daughter. And I remember thinking, this is weird. This can't be right. And anyway, it turned out that it was legit. They were really doing this, and that they had been talking to NASA and asking different astronauts. And I said, I'm flying in space. I don't have time. Just work it out. Figure out this thing. So I go into space, and they took my daughter, who was 13 at the time. She went out to Las Vegas, and she drew a message to me, and they took their cars and reproduced the message in this giant dry lake bed out in Nevada, and you could see it from space. It's called Message to Space. If you got a few minutes, Google it. It's they literally made the coolest video. It's a really cool couple-minute video, and we didn't get paid $1. My kids aren't driving Hyundais. I don't drive a Hyundai, but it was just a really cool thing that they did. But I put that up there because just to make the point that astronauts have families too. A lot of times you see celebrities, politicians, or whatever, and you kind of dehumanize them, and whatever. Our society in general has a very warped relationship with celebrities and famous people and politicians, and it's important to remember that they're people too. There was a story on my second spacewalk. My spacesuit started filling with water, and that news broke, and like my daughter was driving home from school, and she heard astronaut Terry Virts' helmet's filling up with water and he might drown. And so these things happen. Military guys who are deployed, their families are in a similar situation. So I just brought that as kind of a way to humanize these folks. And this was one of the most it was probably the most important part of my mission, and it's taken a really interesting turn in recent weeks. So this is my crew, and my favorite part of flying, honestly, when I was in space, was hanging out with my Russian cosmonaut friends. Me, Anton, and Samantha are in blue. Scott, Misha, and Gennady are in red. Uh, 3 guys were up there. They came back to Earth. Another 3, Scott, Misha, and Gennady came up, and then we became Expedition 43. So there's this constant rotation of 3 or 4 people, depending on the vehicle. And we launched in 2014. Russia had just annexed Crimea. They shot down that airliner. They had started a civil war in the Donbass. One night I was sitting there with one of my crewmates on Expedition 42, watching out the window at red flashes in eastern Ukraine. You could actually see the bombs going off in Ukraine. And so that was an amazing time. And through it all, well, there was one incident in particular that really made this stand out. And it's a long story. I want to save time for Q&A, but the bottom line is, this is Samantha with an ammonia mask. Ammonia is a cooling fluid, and if it leaks, it's really, really, really bad. There's a lot of Dow chemicals here, and anybody who works in the chemical industry knows ammonia is not your friend. NASA told us, hey, if you smell ammonia, they brought in some Mr. Clean, so you could smell cleaning fluid, so you knew what it smelled like. But I'll never forget, the guy said, if you smell ammonia, don't worry about it. You don't have to work the procedure because you're going to die. So it's a pretty dangerous chemical. So we had an ammonia alarm go off one day. Lots of alarms go off, but the ammonia one had never gone off because it's the most dangerous. It's the most serious one. And we ended up spending the day in the Russian segment because the Russians don't use ammonia. They use glycol, which is not as good of a fluid. It doesn't work as well for cooling, a radiator fluid, but it also doesn't kill you dead. So there's advantages to the Russian philosophy versus ours. Anyway, we spent the day down there. Dmitry Rogozin calls us. He was the deputy prime minister. He's the guy in charge of Roscosmos now. He's the guy that's making all these insane threats. And he said, hey, we're going to work together. American colleagues, you can stay as long as you want. We'll get through this together. So it was this moment of like, this is how people can and should get along. And it was, maybe now it's even more interesting that we were able to work together like that while we were in space. But for me, another aspect of this, working with Russians, if you want to be an astronaut, you have to be able to do different languages. I learned French. I started French in 7th grade, minored in it at the academy. I ended up going to the French Air Force Academy for a semester. So learning French as a kid literally is what enabled me to be an astronaut. And I've spent countless trips to France, and it really just made my whole life a lot better, having that ability to work in other cultures. Business nowadays is very international. So the other aspect of this story is just the importance of foreign languages and being able to work in other cultures. This is a return to Earth. So this is a GoPro view out the Soyuz window, and I had the same view out the shuttle. When you hit the air going 17,000 miles an hour coming back, you turn that gas into plasma. So it's not a solid, liquid, or gas. It's plasma. It's like a 4th state of matter. Orange and red fireball. It's just an incredible experience. The shuttle turned gently. It landed like an airplane. It was a gentleman's way to come back to Earth. The Soyuz was more like being inside of a bowling ball. When the pilot chute came out, it tumbled for a few minutes. It was a crazy experience. And this is the landing in a Soyuz. So you're like this, because that's the capsule's not that big. The capsule's only this big, and you're crammed in there. Really, this is not a job for if you have claustrophobia. And you don't land in water like our guys did back in the 60s. You land on the ground in Kazakhstan. So this is what a Soyuz landing is like. More like driving through your neighborhood and running into a telephone pole. Anton actually just landed a couple days ago. I just emailed him, welcome to Earth, and he just emailed me back yesterday. He just came back with the American Mark Vanderhei. So that's the space mission. And I want to go over some home movies and videos that I took really quickly. I'll try and run through this. This is we were wearing masks before masks were cool. This is the U.S. lab window, but there's a few different places you can take pictures. And I like to start with this picture because it's really the story of Earth, which is water. And that thin blue line, you can see that thin blue line of atmosphere there. It's just not a lot. And every human that's ever been is from below that line. And there's nowhere above that line in the whole universe that we know of where humans will ever be able to live without a spacesuit or spaceship. So, like, it really struck me that we have Earth and nothing else. There's no plan B. There's no planet B. And that was one of the things that I came away with for my flights. This is Typhoon Mysak, and I saw 23 different tropical systems, hurricanes, and so on. Mysak was the biggest, most impressive one. That eye was so massive and so well formed; it was incredible. It was beautiful, but it was also, I knew it was going to be this deadly tornado, hitting the Pacific Ocean. It was a monster of a storm, and there's a video of it in A Beautiful Planet if you get to see that film. Beautiful but deadly. It was an interesting paradox. This is another one, Pacific storm called Makala, and you can see it because the moon. I don't know if we can turn the lights down anymore, if possible, because there's a bunch of night images coming up. Um, so that's the eye of the hurricane, and that's a lightning bolt going off the second that I took the picture. So we had an expression in the F-16, "I'd rather be lucky than good," and this was definitely a case of being lucky rather than good. Speaking of that, I did 3 spacewalks in a week. The night before the third one, I was leading it. It was very different than the first 2. I had a huge amount of work to do, and the NASA Public Affairs contacted me. "Hey, Terry, Leonard Nimoy just passed away. Mr. Spock had died. Can you do something?" So I didn't have time. I didn't know what to do. I went down to the cupola. I did the "Live Long and Prosper," took the picture, and I tweeted it without any words or anything. I just tweeted the picture. It got millions of views instantly. You can see the number of likes. It was the morning that I tweeted it. That's the number of likes it got. And what I didn't know, if you look in the background, Wilmington is like right there. This is Long Island, and that's Cape Cod. And Leonard Nimoy was from Boston. So it was just a great tribute to him, unexpected, but really cool. If I was ever flying over South America or the South Pacific, or especially Central Africa at nighttime, and I had time, which was almost never, I would go down to the cupola, turn all the lights off, let my eyes adjust, and let go. One night, I remember I put on Enya's "Storms in Africa," this kind of instrumental song, and just let go and just floated, looking up at the cupola's on the bottom, so I have to look up at Earth and watch this. And those are just lightning flashes. And that's a Central Africa um, video, just incredible. This is something I still have not seen. One of the problems with being an astronaut is your bucket list gets too long. But this is the Northern Lights, and you can see the Earth just because the moon is so bright. This is moonshine on the Earth, moonlight. That's the UK and Ireland. This is Norway and Denmark. You can see the snow, and the Earth's magnetic field captures these coronal mass ejections, giant, massive radiation that the sun shoots off. It takes about a day to get to Earth, and it gets funneled down to the North Pole. This is Moscow going over into Siberia. You can see all the snow down there. But you just see this green. It doesn't look that bright to your eyes, but you can still perceive the green. Our eyes are designed to work at night in black and white, but you can still see the green. Just incredible. To me, it was like this ghost would show up in the Northern Lights. 6 months later, in like May, June, is when you see the Southern Lights. The Northern Lights are December, January kind of thing. The Southern Lights were even more spectacular. Again, thank you to IMAX for this movie. Let us use the clip that they processed. The southern magnetic pole is not 180 degrees from the north. It's like offset, which means our orbit goes a lot closer. Actually, one night I remember flying through. It was the most surreal experience flying through this giant green and pink aurora. It was just amazing. But the northern and southern lights are really amazing from. And I love sunrises and sunsets. On Earth, it takes 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. In space, it takes seconds because you're going so fast. So, and the camera just can't keep up with the exposure change, but it can keep up with moon sets. This is one of many moon sets that I took. Great for physics. You're learning about refraction and diffraction here. night moon. Sometimes the moon's off to the side, so it takes a while, and sometimes it's on front of your orbit. It's based on a parameter called beta, and they never got old. So imagine in nighttime, again, you have to imagine just going down to the cupola, close your eyes, it's nighttime, let your eyes adjust. And when you open your eyes, you look out and you see this. Um, Again, at nighttime, you can see the Earth because the moon is reflecting on it. This is moon reflection in the water. That thin blue line during the day is actually a lot thicker at night. That brown is really high, like 100 or hundreds of kilometers of atmosphere that you can see at nighttime. But that cloud in the middle, again, the screen is not doing it justice, but that's the Milky Way, and there's just billions of galaxies. I know the basic constellations. I've had a telescope, and I know, the main constellations. I could never pick out any stars or constellations from space just because there's so many billions of stars. You could pick out the planets out to Saturn, from Mercury to Saturn, but I could never recognize any stars. So these are just some places we can play a quick game. I'll cruise through it. This is me in the cupola taking these photos. So that is obviously Italy. One time when I do with kids, I'll have a game. I want them to yell out where they think it is, and this kid yelled out Montenegro, and I was like, "You're right. There's on the other side of the Adriatic." It was kind of funny, but Italy is definitely the $100 Jeopardy question. It's very easy to recognize that country. This one, I didn't know this. First time I saw this, I went and I got my crewmates. I got my crewmates, hey guys, look, and they floated down. They're like, yeah, that's Dubai, and I didn't know they did this Palm Island during COVID. I spent a couple months right there on Fron B. My buddy has a place down there, and this is the World Village. So if you look at it, there's North America, South America, Africa. I never noticed that until I was looking at the picture, and I was like, hey, that's like the Earth. Anyway, it's really cool. The Burj Khalifa, the tallest building, is over here. Um, just a really cool thing that you can see these man-made objects from. Anybody recognize this? There you go. And Tower Hill. Right there's the Delaware River. There's the Chesapeake Bay. So there's Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington. So yeah, this is the I-95. This is the roughly the view I had from the shuttle for like 2 seconds on my first launch. Um, One of the chapters in my Nat Geo book is called Colors because I got to know the Earth by color, and the deserts are all different. Australia is very red. Saudi's kind of pink and light colored. Algeria is really red and black mountains. This is the Namib Desert, and these sand dunes there you can see from space. I remember thinking, wow, those are some big sand dunes. Well, I Googled it, and they're actually the biggest sand dunes on Earth in the Namib Desert. 2,000-foot tall sand dunes. It's pretty amazing. And this is another set of sand dunes that you can see it only instead of air, the fluid is water. This is the Bahamas, and this blue turquoise color is just spectacular. So gorgeous. But you can see the sand dunes that are made here. They're just being made from water and not air under the water. This is there's a couple places on Earth like this, but this is Patagonia. I had a chance to go there to film this TV project that we were working on, but it is spectacular. It's so beautiful down there. It's so natural. I came away from there thinking, man, this is the most pure place. But the lakes are all different shades of blue and green. You can see these glaciers there. There's a glacier over here on the left. It's just a really cool place down in the southern tip of South America. And this is a place called, well, it's the big island of Papua New Guinea. And this is just orbital noon. So the sun is reflecting on these rivers that are flowing out of the jungle. So the black is jungle, and the white are rivers going into the sea, South Pacific. Really spectacular. And I remember thinking, there's people down there that have never had any technology. What would they say if there was an astronaut flying in space, taking a picture of them? And it was kind of a profound moment. So with that, there's a few lessons that I'm just going to talk about real quickly because I really do want to give you time for Q&A. And there's really two big ones that I kind of came away from my space mission thinking. The first had to do with people, and I realized that you can't really see people during the day, but at nighttime you can see them from city lights. This is a small city. Anybody recognize this town? Village? So this is Shanghai over here, and like each one of these are multi-million people cities that I've never heard of. China is amazing how many cities they have, how much economic development's happened in China. Blows your mind. It's really incredible. And the thing that hit me was that you see people at night in city lights, but what you're seeing is not population. What you're seeing is wealth. And this is a picture. I didn't take this. This is a composite geosynchronous satellite image. And they took pictures when there was no clouds, obviously. But you can see in Western Europe, there's lots of lights. There's hundreds of millions of people. In the Middle East, there's a lot of lights right there. There's only 25 million people in Saudi, but there's a lot of lights on. In Africa, there's 1 billion people, and you can see the Nile. You can see Nigeria has some. It's an oil state, right? Johannesburg, and in between those three things, there's 1 billion people. There's no lights. So I came away from that asking myself, why is that, and what can we do about it? Um, and the most profound thing I thought at the time was this place. I don't know if you can recognize this, um, but this is the Korean Peninsula, and it struck me that what you're really seeing at nighttime is politics, where people get politics right and where people get politics wrong. And this is Seoul, one of the brightest cities on earth. This is South Korea, super vibrant, lots and lots of lights. It's a very modern country. I spent a year of my life flying up and down this little brown, looks like a river. This is the Demilitarized Zone. And I don't know who gets to name these things, but they have a definite ironic sense of humor that the most heavily militarized place on earth is called the Demilitarized Zone. Um, but and then up here, this is North Korea, and it's just a black hole. There's same number of people. There's Pyongyang. Our BFF, Mr. Kim, is there, and this is a disaster. And up here, this is China. You can see China up top. But my point is, you could actually see politics from space. I watched people dying from Russian bombs in Ukraine from space in 2015. And so people are always like, astronauts don't see borders. Let's just hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And that's not entirely true. The other thing I'm just going to say real quick is environment. The name of our movie was A Beautiful Planet, and it really is a beautiful planet. But there were two things that I could see. This isn't scientific. This is just Terry Virts' eyeballs. One of them was pollution. And that same picture of Korea, this is over the Bohai Sea. This is northeastern China. It's just polluted. It is a brown smog there that's awful. One of my crewmates, after I left, got a picture of Beijing, and we were like, how did you get a picture of Beijing? It's never possible to even see it. I do a side-by-side picture of Baltimore, which is not like the environmental pristine city of America, but when it's compared to Beijing, it looks like it. So you can see this pollution, with your own eyes. India also is very smoggy, but there's nowhere like China when it comes to smog. The rest of the planet, you couldn't see the pollution. It's not, of course, it's there, but I just couldn't see it with my eyes. And I put this picture in there of the Chesapeake Bay because when Tony Myers was making Beautiful Planet, I said, Tony, let's not make it all doom and gloom because there are good, positive environmental stories, and the Chesapeake Bay is one. Back in the 70s, it was a mess. Farmer pollution was going in there. They clamped down. There was a lot of restrictions. When I was a kid, you couldn't fish for rockfish, and oysters were restricted. And now it's back, and it's in pretty good shape. And it's not perfect, and there's a constant battle, but it's an environmental story where we made some hard decisions and we fixed it, and we got it, 80% or whatever. This is oh, sorry, Delaware and the Chesapeake Bay and Long Island and Cape Cod, so to give you some perspective, and Atlantic Ocean over here. So with that, I really do want to talk about, do Q&A for you guys. So if we can bring up the lights, please. I was going to talk about my films and books, but let's just get right to Q&A. So we have some microphones. So raise your hands, and the ladies with the microphones will get you the mics. and we'll just crank them out. We'll do lightning round. We'll start with you without a mic. Just go ahead. No mic. Yeah. President Obama asked me that when we went to visit him in the Oval Office. So getting readjusted is A, you feel super heavy. And I went to play basketball with my son, and I was like, oh, I couldn't even get the ball up to the rim. And B, you feel super dizzy. I felt really, really dizzy. I was able to walk around after 200 days. They make you lay down and stand up to try and get lightheaded. And I was able to do all that. They make you close your eyes and walk with one foot in front of the other, which is hard to do right now. If the cops ever ask you to do that, be sure to get a lawyer. But I was able to do it, but it was painful. And I was telling the story. They test you in this machine where they make the walls move and they measure your foot pressure. And I actually had a better balance score 200 days a week after landing, so 200 days in a week than I did before launch, which is crazy. So the first day was super painful, but I recovered really quickly. Now we'll go to the microphones. Whoever has a mic over here.
All right.
Who's got? Oh, there you go.
Out of
Yep.
your experiments, were there any like groundbreaking discoveries you made, or just like something that you found the most interesting out of the many experiments?
The problem with experiments is you do the experiment and then you kind of don't ever know what happens and the experiments take months or years to do, and then it takes a year or two for the group of PIs, the primary investigator and the scientist, to write their papers. But they do get back to you sometimes. And I think the biggest thing learned from my time is still in work. There's this big giant machine called AMS, alpha magnetic spectrometer. It's bigger than a refrigerator, and it's a particle detector that's basically looking for dark matter to see what the universe is made of. And that investigation's still going on. I did work for a large pharmaceutical company, maybe the largest, on mice for bone and muscle drugs, but it's a big pharmaceutical company, so it's proprietary, and they don't tell you what they learned. So I'm not sure what came of that. But that we did the second group. They're on group like 22 now, so it must be going well because they funded a bunch. Yes.
I was my bad. I was wondering, like, what were like the showering conditions in space? Like, were we like clean? Were we not clean? Like, what's the vibe here?
That's an easy question. There were no showers, so it's like every 13-year-old boy's dream. No showers for 200 days. But with what you do is you basically take a wet towel and clean with that. So 2.5 hours exercise, I would get drenched with sweat. I mean, it was like I was sweating. So you need to do something. So we had these special like camping towels that had soap in them. And then we had those free sun bags, only instead of drinks, they were actually soap bags. And there's a spreadsheet on Excel, and you look on it, and we got one Under Armour t-shirt every 2 weeks. So Under Armour, I did an hour Skype with Kevin Plank from space. I love Under Armour. It reeks after a day. And ask any of your teachers. I don't know if you're allowed to wear those here, but at public schools, teachers are dying when the teenage boys start wearing Under Armour. So imagine exercising for 2 weeks in those shirts. They smelled really bad. I did an experiment with this stuff called merino wool. Merino wool is incredible. It's this special kind of sheep from New Zealand, and they made these exercise shirts out of them. And I would get drenched sweat in this merino wool t-shirt every day for a month there's no washing machines. This would cost probably $20,000 or $40,000 to launch to space. So you can't afford washing machines because of the water. And it didn't smell. After 30 days, it did not smell. I sent Kevin Plank back one of my Under Armour shirts in a like triple bagged in a Ziploc with duct tape and stuff. And like 6 months later, I gave it to him, and it reeked so bad still. So with all that being said, you do shower, but it's with wet towels. And that spreadsheet I was telling you about, so it tells you get an Under Armour shirt every 2 weeks. You get a new pair of running shorts every week. You get a polo shirt once a month. So you have this great, and the soap bag number was 2. So I assume that meant you get one every 2 days. So I was using my soap every other day. And then after like a couple weeks, I couldn't find any more soap. And I called down to Houston. Hey, Houston, where's my soap? And it was once every 2 weeks, not every 2 days. So I used up all my soap in like the first couple weeks of my mission. But I found some emergency stash that people had left, and they had those soapy towels. So basically, in the IMAX movie, there's a video of me taking a shower afterwards. It's rinseless shampoo like they have at the hospital for people that are stuck in bed, and so you can rinse your hair and a wet towel, and it works good. Like it, it keeps you clean. But there's no actual shower. The first shower I took was in Scotland after I landed, and we had to stop for gas on the way back to Houston, and it was so painful. It was like knives because I hadn't had a shower and my skin wasn't ready for it. Showering really sucked for a couple days after I landed. The microphone over here. No one has ever asked me that question. I have been asked a million questions. It is really hard to ask me a question that no one's ever asked. What was my work like with NASA after I came back? After my first flight, I wanted to fly again. It was only 2 weeks. I went to Harvard Business School, and that was so important for me because I realized there's cool stuff to do out there. I realized there was going to be life after NASA when I went to Harvard. And I also realized that I wanted to fly again. After my second flight, I had done everything there was to do. I was a shuttle pilot. I did spacewalks. I was a commander. And I knew we weren't going to the moon anytime soon, to say the least. So I could either stick around and do it again or go do other things that I want to do in life. And I'm starting a company right now, an energy startup. I've been doing film and TV projects. There's just other stuff I wanted to do. So I made the conscious decision to at least give NASA a year because there was a lot of stuff that I knew I could help train other people and share the lessons I learned and do science and stuff. But so I stayed for about a year and then left. It was just the right time for me. You don't ever want to leave a job when it's not the right time, but sometimes in life. And I was there for 16 years, and that's about the right. I'm a big fan. I think we need to have 18-year term limits. That's my personal opinion. Because after 18 years, you've learned everything. Honestly, the job had become easy because I had done everything. I like to challenge myself. That was my decision-making process. Over here. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah. Sorry, we went a little bit right on time. It's a school night. Who has the microphone?
Right
Oh,
here.
there you go. Okay.
Was there anything you really expected to like about being in space, but you just couldn't enjoy?
Okay, that's 2 questions in a row that nobody's ever asked me. You guys are set a record. Is there anything that I expected to like, but then could not enjoy? For me, the first 2 days I was in space were really painful. Everybody has pain when you get in space. For me, it was a headache. Like just moving my head really hurt. I could only move my head about this fast because my inner ear, the neurovestibular system was going crazy. Like, what's going on? There's no more why are you falling for 8 hours and days? And so the first couple days were not enjoyable at all. And I kept on seeing the most beautiful thing that you cannot imagine out the window. And I just wanted to go look at that, and I wanted to take pictures and film it, but I couldn't because I had to work. And so that was probably the biggest thing. When I did have time, it was awesome looking out the window, and I tried to film as much as I could, but 99% of the space mission was just work, which is fine. It's good. I mean, I enjoyed the work, but and people said, "Well, would you want to go back?" And there's these private missions. If I could go film a movie, I would go back. That was the one thing I always wanted more of, was time looking out the window. So I have an idea. Do you guys want to do a selfie? And I'll do a video, and you want to yell Tower Hill? All right. So I'll do a countdown. 3, 2, 1, and then everybody just yell Tower Hill, and I'll put it on Instagram. Is Instagram cool? Facebook's like old people, right? Yeah. All right. For the teachers, you can put it on Facebook, but for the kids, we'll do Instagram. Put it on TikTok. All right. All right. You guys ready? Here comes the countdown. 3, 2, 1. Tower Hill. All right. There we go. Thanks. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much. That was really fun. That was really fun. Hope I didn't keep him too late.
Wow. First of all, it is so great to be back in person at this special forum. And don't you think that Colonel Virts is one of the very best forum speakers we've ever had? Yes. So I do want to thank our forum council members. Please stand. Our student forum council members, please stand. Yes. Thank you, guys. Our forum council meets and discusses topics and really helps to select terrific speakers. And so thank you. And I also want to thank the chair of our history department, and that would be none other than Ms. Fletcher, for all of your care of the forum series. Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. And I should also thank not only each of you for coming out tonight in person, but we do have an audience, remote audience. And I want to thank Ms. Pizarro for managing our remote audience. Thanks for tuning in for this special occasion. And most importantly, the forum would not be possible without the vision and generosity of Mr. and Mrs. Rappolt, who are here with us tonight. Thank you, Pam and Bill. And for those of you ninth graders who are new to Tower Hill, or anyone new to Tower Hill, faculty too, in 1998, the Rapolts created the Tower Hill Forum series in honor of their children, Gabby and Bill and Sarah, but also to honor the Tower Hill faculty for their scholarship and dedication. So this is a wonderful opportunity for our community. Thank you again to the Rapolts. And then last but not least, Mr. Marshall, who's been dimming the lights so we can see Earth from space, and then Mr. Smith for taking photos here on Earth. And Colonel Virts, you are truly, I love how your lens, we're not quite finished, guys. I love how your lens on Earth teaches us some messages. And as we approach Earth Day and the Green Summit, you inspire us to take care of our planet, to make sure that we will continue to have these beautiful images of Earth, even though we see strife and struggle through your amazing, amazing images and your stories. So let's go forward, taking Colonel Virts' wisdom to try to say yes when we have opportunities, and not to say no to ourselves and to our dreams. And hopefully therein we will create a more peaceful and knowledgeable world together. Colonel Virts, thank you so much. It is an honor to have you, and we will give you on the way out your very own Tower Hill ball cap that hopefully you can wear into space another time, or feature somewhere in a movie. But thank you so much. Have a great evening. Another round of applause for Colonel Virts.